Hi, hello everybody. Thank you for coming. So this talk is called, or at least it's called How to Think About Technology. It could probably equally well have been called How Not to Think About Technology, because really it's a bit of a mixture of the ways that people tend to think about technology and why I think that those tend to miss the bigger picture. And obviously when I say technology, I'm talking really about new technology. I don't think you'd be particularly interested if I told you how to think about existing technology. We all know what we make of cars and planes and boats and all the rest of it. To some extent we think we know about computers, although I'll get into that in a little bit. But there are lots of things coming through now that we don't really understand. There are autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, there's artificial intelligence, there's all the kinds of ways that social media work, none of which I think that at this point we necessarily have a very good handle on. And I want to sort of suggest some ways that we can think about those things. This is going to be very ad hoc and casual. This isn't a neatly precision-drilled piece of speaking, so I'm going to just think out loud at you, and hopefully you'll pick something up and we can talk about it a bit at the end. So, is technology a force for good? This is kind of a very basic question, but it's one that, that provokes a surprising amount of reaction. So, the idea that technology is a force for good at its simplest level is kind of the Silicon Valley way of looking at things. There's this idea that technology is self-evidently by itself a force for good in the world. You get that in kind of things like Google's original maxim of don't be evil. You get it in the vast number of talks that tell you about changing the world without necessarily being very specific about it. And it lends itself to boosterish kind of proposition that there are technological solutions for everything, what Evgeny Morozov calls solutionism. And it's this idea that you just need technology, it will solve things, everything will be great. And at the far end of that, you get the kind of the singularity kind of people who think that our destiny is ultimately to merge with technology and we'll live in a kind of a post-human utopia as a result of all that. So that's one perspective. Another perspective is that is it a force for bad? The reason I picked this image in particular is because this is the reaction that we always get in New Scientist whenever we post anything that is to do with artificial intelligence or computers being smart or machines doing things that humans can do. We always get instantaneously on Twitter, on social media, we get Terminator and Skynet references. They're actually banned in the New Scientist style guide. We're not allowed to refer to them because it's an immediate and lazy reaction to that kind of story. Why do people have that sort of reaction? In a lot of ways, it's a natural thing. I mean, it's natural to be concerned about things you don't understand and things that are unknown, things that you haven't experienced yet. That's a human reaction to anything, really. And there's a long history of techno-panics. People have always worried about new technology, about things they don't understand, whose consequences are a little bit unclear. So that's kind of the knee-jerk, something must be wrong, and underneath a lot of it is this idea that it will in some way expunge or dilute the essence of humanity. The Terminator is a very, direct, on-the-nose representation of getting rid of humans. But there is this idea that in some way technology will diminish us. That by taking away some of the things that we do or enjoy or the ways that we experience the world, it will somehow reduce us. I have to say, this is not surprising coming from someone who edits a magazine like the one I edit, but I've never really understood this perspective because I think it's slightly cart before horse. We are humans first and foremost. I don't really understand how you can diminish that. You can only express it through technology. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but that's my prejudice here. So when you're forced to pick between these two extremes and you're faced with a new technology like, say, artificial intelligence, and you're not really sure whether you think this is a good thing, a bad thing, or whatever else, one of the temptations is to say, well, it's neither of those things. It's just neutral. It doesn't do anything. So you get this idea that technology is neutral, and that takes, that it's somehow outside of people, that it's almost a force of nature. And I want to just talk through a few of the ways that manifests. There are kind of axioms that people have essentially come up with, some of which, they're debatable, I would say, in terms of whether they're, how true they are. So, information wants to be free. This is quite an old one. I guess you've probably heard about this. So, certainly to a large extent, information is free in the world that we live in at the moment. I think it's questionable that information wants to be free. That's something that, a formulation that has been very catchy and has been used as justification for all manner of things, from file sharing through to WikiLeaks, through to the way that the entire media model at this point operates. The received wisdom is there's no point charging for news because it should be free and it will be free. And that's all very well, but I think that saying that technology wants anything is giving it a stature that it doesn't really deserve. It's making it sound like it's a natural force, and it isn't. It's a human-made enterprise. Humans make technology, humans use technology. Saying that it wants something, I think, is a bit of a red herring. It has its echoes in things like Moore's law. So Moore's law says that the processor capacity doubles every couple of years. What people tend to forget about that is it's not a law of nature. It's something that happens because humans decide they want it to happen. And engineers get to work and they make that happen. It's not a law of nature. It's not something that just happens by itself. So, algorithms are unbiased. This is a more recent idea. Sorry, this is a bit hard to read on here. That's an autocomplete map of London, and some of you will probably be familiar with this idea. So if you go to Google and you type in "your place is," it will give you some suggestions to what your place is. So, for example, the place nearest to where I live, it says Catford is a dump, which is not particularly kind. Bexley is bonkers. Romford, for some reason, Romford is the cruelest of cities. I don't know what that's about. But there we are. That's what you get if you type in. This is actually a couple of years old. So this was 2013, and Londonist put it together. There are lots of other exercises you can do like this to find out what Google's algorithms think that you should think about something or thinks that you'll be interested in. I have to say, I mean, having done this again more recently, some of the responses now are actually significantly unkinder than they were at the time. So I think this is quite gentle. Some of the ones you get now are actually a bit more pointed, and some of them not in very pleasant ways, so that's kind of interesting. So Google's algorithm is not unbiased exactly. I mean, it's unbiased in the sense it's telling you what the most popular results are, what people search for, but of course it's feeding that cycle, because by way of suggesting these things to you, there's a kind of implicit order in what it's telling you. And you see the same things in other areas. So you see the same thing in Facebook, where the Facebook feed is a subject of great mystery to all who have to observe it. We know that Facebook has experimented with manipulating it to try and induce different emotional states in its users. An experiment which, incidentally, I mean, if it had been kind of carried out by a university, would have been grilled by the ethics board. Facebook doesn't have to really worry about that sort of thing. But there's, so Facebook's feed doesn't necessarily have to be unbiased. It is in one sense. It shows you things you'll like. That does not necessarily mean that it shows you everything you should see or that it doesn't have inbuilt bias in it. And then there's another level of this, which is something like the new sharing services that exist, Airbnb, Uber, and so on. Those in some ways operate slightly differently. They allow their users' biases to be masked behind algorithms. So essentially, it's very hard to disentangle some of the variables it might be interested in, your creditworthiness, your ratings, your place of residence, from other characteristics about yourself, which in other contexts would be subject to discrimination law. So algorithms are not unbiased. Algorithms never have been unbiased. And simply washing your hands of anything that they do and saying, well, computer says no, that's not really a sensible approach. And finally, this one's a much more recent one, which is that automation is inevitable. And this one sort of crept up because unsurprisingly, people have only really started to care about automation and its effect on employment since it started to threaten white-collar work, basically. I mean, as long as it was factory robots putting blue-collar workers out of business, nobody really cared that much, frankly. When it came to white-collar jobs, unsurprisingly, the chattering classes suddenly got terribly interested in this, and it was a big threat, and we will do something about it. The argument here really is that the economics of this are inarguable. If you have a robot or a computer that will work 24 hours a day, that doesn't require payment, that doesn't require breaks and so on, then how can a human being really compete with that? And I'll come back to that in a bit. So where we've got to is, so technology is not intrinsically good, technology is not intrinsically bad, and technology is not neutral, which is not an observation that's original to me. It's actually Kranzberg's first law of technology. Melvin Kranzberg was a historian of technology, and in 1985 he came up with 6 laws, actually. I'm only going to tell you about the first one, which sort of described how he felt people should think about technology, and I found this one to be useful if puzzling. So, technology is neither good nor bad, fair enough. The kicker is that bit, nor is it neutral. Which is all very zen. You kind of get, well, all right, so where does that leave us? Where it leaves us is with this. So this is, I won't read all of this out, but technology's interaction with the social ecology is such that technical developments frequently have environmental, social, and human consequences that go far beyond the immediate purposes of the devices. So the point really being that, that technology does not exist by itself in a vacuum. To some extent, we tend to think that if you get a new phone or whatever else, it's a new device that enters your life. We don't really think about the ways that it shapes the broader ecosystem around us or shapes society. And the equally important corollary to that is we have control over that environment. We have control over the conditions under which we use technology. And so it's not just that we are passive, we have to passively accept what technology does to us or how we use it. We have control over what we can do with it. We have controls over the way we can think about it. So technology, neither good nor bad nor neutral. And I'm going to just talk through a few examples to try and give you an idea about what I mean by that, or what Kranzberg might have meant by that.